my reel-to-reel tape machine, and so I was waiting for him to show up.
Grace Mitchell entered the world in 1965, Boston, a city of grit and hidden artistry. Her parents, both musicians, filled their modest apartment with sheet music, half-finished canvases, and the faint scent of rosin from her father's piano. Her father, a jazz pianist, had hands that could shape air into melody. Yet his temper fractured the calm of their small home, leaving Grace hyper-aware of silence and tension. Her mother, a mezzo-soprano, offered comfort with her voice but demanded perfection in every note, every chore, every glance. Grace quickly learned that music could save but also expose the deepest wounds of the soul. By age 7, she scribbled poems in secret notebooks, whispers to walls that would never reply. School offered accolades but also anxiety. She excelled, yet shied away from attention. Recesses felt like minefields of comparison and judgment. At 10, Grace discovered songwriting, combining the fragments of her poetry with simple melodies on a battered upright piano. Her earliest piece, Winter Echoes, explored loneliness and tentative hope, hinting at the honesty that would later define her artistry. Each chord and lyric became a lifeline, a quiet rebellion against a childhood shaped by conditional praise, strict routines, and moments of invisible emotional neglect. Music was her sanctuary and her voice. When friends laughed at her clumsy attempts to play for them, she retreated, not with shame but with determination. Grace began imagining herself on stages she hadn't yet stepped on, imagining audiences who would listen not to perfection but to the raw pulse of truth in her songs. By the time she entered her teens, she had learned an essential lesson: her voice could never remain silent, and her story, though painful and private, demanded expression. Even then, in the quiet hours of her bedroom, Grace's music whispered a promise to the world. She would rise, and when she did, her voice would be impossible to ignore. At 13, tragedy struck with a force that reshaped Grace Mitchell's world. Her older brother, Michael, had always been her confidant, her partner in secret games and music-filled afternoons, but a routine surgery turned catastrophic. Hospital corridors reeked of antiseptic. In fear, the BP machines became an ominous soundtrack to her grief. Grace watched helplessly as her family fractured under saw her father retreating into silence, her mother consumed by guilt and worry. When Michael died, Grace's childhood innocence crumbled with him. The home she knew became a place of shadows and quiet despair. Music became her sanctuary, a way to breathe when the weight of loss felt unbearable. But even in its solace, the emptiness lingered like a ghost she could never shake. The following year brought another blow. At 14, a music teacher publicly dismissed her talent during a school recital, laughing at her tentative playing. Humiliation burned in her chest. Yet it sparked something stronger, a refusal to let others define her worth. She realized that validation must come from within. Grace began to bury herself in the piano, her fingers tracing melodies that carried her secrets, her longing, her sorrow, composing in cafes and small local venues. She performed for strangers who had no expectations but felt the raw honesty. In her voice, the connection was electric. Almost therapeutic, Grace learned that music could transform private pain into shared experience. By 16, her resilience had crystallized into artistry. Every lyric she wrote was both confessional and magnetic, a mirror of inner life that drew listeners close. Even then, she sensed the world would test her at every turn, yet she was quietly ready. The loss, the betrayal, the early heartbreak call became the foundation of a voice that would later command stages, a sound born of survival and honed in the shadows of grief. Grace Mitchell's story was only beginning, and it already carried the weight and brilliance of someone who had truly learned to endure. At 17, Grace Mitchell's life began to shift in ways she could hardly imagine. A local radio station stumbled upon a demo she had recorded in her bedroom, a rough mix of piano, voice, and raw emotion. The airwaves carried her story, and soon praise flooded it, urging her toward professional recording. Her parents, protective and wary of the industry's seductive dangers, hesitated, warning her about fleeting fame and exploitative producers. But Grace, driven by a voice that refused to stay quiet, pressed forward, her ambition tempered with the careful self-awareness that had shaped her since childhood. By 18, she auditioned for Horizon Records in New York, standing before a panel of executives who admired her honesty but expected compromise. One producer suggested changes that would soften her unique voice for mainstream appeal. Grace shook her head. Her music was her story, her pain, her triumphs that could not be diluted. The courage to say no so early in her career would set the tone for everything that followed. Her debut album, recorded over 3 tense weeks, became a revelation. The single, Shattered Glass, blended fragility and defiance, a haunting anthem that felt like a window into her soul. Critics hailed her authenticity, lauding the raw emotion threaded through every chord. Fans connected instantly, drawn not to polish, but to truth. Yet fame brought isolation. Applause filled arenas, but in hotel rooms and backstage corners. Questions gnawed. Could she survive the relentless pace of the industry without losing herself? Could her honesty withstand the pressures to conform? These early trials forged Grace's artistic principles. Vulnerability became her signature, defiance her shield. Every performance, every lyric, was a testament to courage, not just the courage to stand on stage, but the courage to remain herself. At this fragile, yet transformative moment, Grace Mitchell had taken the first step toward becoming a star, who would not only be seen, but truly felt. At 21, Grace Mitchell's life took a thrilling yet treacherous turn when she met Daniel Carter, a charismatic guitarist whose presence electrified any room he entered. His charm was intoxicating, his energy magnetic, and soon their whirlwind romance became the pulse of Grace's days and the heartbeat of her songs. Each melody she crafted reflected the euphoria of first love, stolen glances, late-night conversations, and shared dreams of musical glory. Their connection seemed unbreakable, a fusion of creativity and desire that fueled her artistry. But the glow dimmed quickly. Betrayal arrived in the cruelest form. Daniel's infidelity surfaced through a leaked personal journal, exposing secrets Grace had never imagined would see the light of day. The shock and heartbreak threatened to silence her, yet she transformed that pain into music. Her next album became a raw confessional, a collection of songs infused with sorrow, anger, and tentative hope. Tracks like Fractured Light and Echoes of You resonated far beyond her fanbase. Listeners connected to her vulnerability as if she were narrating their own heartbreaks. Music became the bridge between private grief and public resonance, turning personal devastation into communal healing, yet the spotlight proved relentless. Every intimate detail of Grace's life became tabloid fodder. Scrutiny magnified her insecurities, and anxiety crept into her performances. Panic attacks became frequent, sometimes striking mid-stage, leaving her trembling under the glare of lights that once felt empowering. Music remained both her salvation and her battleground, each lyric a lifeline, each note a declaration that pain could be transformed into art. Fans felt it deeply, sensing authenticity in her every word. By confronting betrayal publicly while channeling it into her songs, Grace carved a place in the hearts of millions not just as a performer, but as a storyteller whose courage illuminated the shadows of human emotion. Grace Mitchell's third album, Through the Fire, marked the moment she stepped fully into the glare of fame. Like her earlier releases, this project had both critical and commercial weight. Singles climbed the charts with surprising speed, earning radio airplay, television appearances, and headline tours that stretched coast to coast. The attention thrilled her, but it also brought relentless pressure. Studio executives urged her toward formulaic hits, insisting she soften her lyrics, change melodies, or collaborate with songwriters who had no connection to her story. Grace refused. Every word, every chord was hers, and authenticity was non-negotiable. Touring, however, tested more than her resolve. Nights blurred into early mornings. Hotel rooms became temporary homes, and the road carried a constant companion, anxiety. Sleep eluded her mind spinning with worry about performances, public perception, and the subtle compromises creeping in around her. She often found herself pacing backstage, headphones in, rehearsing scales for hours, grounding herself through music. Panic threatened, but the stage also offered salvation. Each show became a sacred space, a place where the applause validated more than talent, it celebrated resilience, the courage to remain herself amid chaos. Despite the exhaustion, her songs retained raw honesty. Tracks like Burning Embers and No Chains resonated with listeners precisely because they bore the weight of her struggle. Fans recognized the tension behind each note, the refusal to bend to industry whims, and they connected deeply. Grace's rise was no accident. It was forged in fire, a testament to the truth that talent alone could not sustain a career. It demanded integrity, grit, and endurance. The stage became both battlefield and sanctuary, each performance a declaration. She would not be molded or silenced. Her music told the world she had survived loss, heartbreak, and pressure, and she had survived loss, heartbreak, and pressure, and she would thrive on her own terms. By the age of 24, Grace Mitchell's world seemed to glow with success. But beneath the surface, shadows gathered. A failed engagement left her heart raw, a mirror reflecting insecurities she had long buried. Family tensions resurfaced, old grief, her father's increasing distance, lingering sibling rivalries, and unresolved childhood traumas all demanded attention. Fame only magnified these pressures, turning every misstep into public fodder. Grace realized that the applause on stage could not soothe the ache behind the curtains. She turned relentlessly to songwriting as therapy. Late nights in dimly lit studios became her sanctuary. With a pen in hand and the piano as her confidant, she explored betrayal, loss, and mortality, writing lyrics that confronted pain without apology. Each track became a confession, a lifeline thrown across the gulf between personal despair and public expectation. The music was honest to the point of vulnerability, raw enough to tremble under its own weight, yet resilient in tone, reflecting a young woman learning to wield her pain as strength. Her fourth album, Echoes to the Heart, emerged from this crucible of struggle. Songs like Fragile Threads and Silent Storms were steeped in emotion, revealing the paradox Grace had come to understand. Visibility invited scrutiny. Yet it was through that very vulnerability that she forged the deepest connection. With her audience, critics praised the emotional depth, noting a sophistication in her storytelling that went beyond pop formulas. Fans felt seen, as if Grace had opened a window into their own private struggles, validating their fears and triumphs alike. Through these battles, Grace began to chart the terrain of her artistic identity. Music became both compass and anchor, guiding her through the turbulence of fame, while allowing her to reclaim control of her story. The album solidified her voice, a voice unafraid to confront wounds, illuminate truth, and transform personal battles into universal resonance. Grace was learning that power came not from perfection, but from honesty, endurance, and courage. At 27, Grace Mitchell faced a crossroads. The music industry demanded repetition, another album of familiar hits, but she craved evolution. The result was Phoenix Rising, an audacious departure that fused jazz, orchestral arrangements, and experimental soundscapes. Grace took risks no one expected, unconventional song structures, layered harmonies, and lyrics that probed both personal and universal struggles. Critics initially approached the work with skepticism, unsure if mainstream audiences would embrace it. But as the album unfolded, it became clear Grace had not just created music, she had created a movement. Each track spoke of transformation, resilience, and the refusal to conform, solidifying her as a fearless innovator unafraid to defy industry norms. Behind the acclaim, Grace's private battles continued. Anxiety and self-doubt shadowed her moments of triumph, reminding her that creativity often walks hand in hand with vulnerability. Therapy became her anchor, meditation her compass. These practices helped her navigate the dizzying pace of recording sessions and high-stakes performances, keeping her grounded while her career soared. International touring added both opportunity and strain. Long flights, unfamiliar cultures, and relentless schedules tested her physically and emotionally. Yet each city brought new insights as her new determination, performing in Tokyo, Paris, and Rio, Grace found audiences that responded not just to her voice, but to the authenticity behind it. Every sold-out venue, every standing ovation, reinforced her belief that risk and honesty could triumph over expectation. Phoenix Rising wasn't merely a commercial success. It became a blueprint for balancing artistry with personal survival. Grace's evolution showed that true creativity emerges not from comfort, but from the courage to confront fear, to embrace transformation, and to rise even when everything else threatens to crumble. In a world that often prizes conformity, Grace Mitchell had proven that reinvention is not only possible, it is necessary. In her 30s, Grace Mitchell faced the echoes of a lifetime she had often tried to silence. Childhood abuse, family loss, and a string of failed relationships resurfaced with unsettling clarity. Fame offered no shield. If anything, it amplified every fear, every wound. The world saw a confident performer, but behind closed doors, Grace wrestled with memories she had carried quietly for decades. Rather than burying the pain, she made a bold choice to confront it openly. Interviews, essays, and her memoirs became platforms where she could articulate her struggles, challenge societal taboos, and reclaim her narrative. Music, as always, remained her truest vessel. Silent Rain, her fifth studio album, became a testimony to survival and healing. Tracks like Echoes of Silence and Shattered Light blended haunting melodies with confessional lyrics exploring grief, betrayal, and the journey toward recovery. Grace recorded in long, solitary sessions, often late at night, allowing raw emotion to pour into every note. The resulting songs were unpolished yet powerful, resonating deeply with fans who had long concealed their own scars. Social media extended her reach beyond traditional boundaries. Listeners shared their stories, connecting with Grace's honesty in real time. Fans described feeling seen, understood, and empowered to face their own shadows. This dynamic transformed her music from personal catharsis into communal healing. Grace discovered a new dimension to her artistry. Vulnerability was no longer weakness. It was courage, influence, and liberation. Through these struggles, Grace became a voice for resilience. She showed that trauma could be acknowledged without allowing it to define one's life, that pain could be transformed into strength, and that honesty in art could foster genuine connection. By embracing her shadows, she illuminated a path for others, proving that even the deepest wounds could be a source of light, hope, and enduring strength. By the time Grace Mitchell reached 40, her life was a tapestry woven from triumph, loss, and relentless perseverance. Over 15 million albums sold, countless awards, and international recognition had cemented her as one of the most influential voices of her generation. Yet for Grace, fame had never been the ultimate measure of success. What mattered most was connection, the ability to touch lives through music, to translate personal pain into shared experience. She realized that legacy was not built on accolades, but on the depth of the bond she forged with listeners. Beyond the studio and stage, Grace saw new ways to extend her influence. Writing children's books allowed her to nurture creativity and empathy in young minds, weaving lessons of resilience and hope into imaginative stories. Music workshops gave her a chance to mentor aspiring artists, encouraging them to embrace vulnerability and authenticity, just as she had. These endeavors reflected her belief that artistry is not only about performance, but also about teaching, guiding, and inspiring others. Her later albums mirrored this introspection. Tracks explored themes of identity, aging, love, and fragile, balance of joy and grief. Songs like Silver Horizons and Reflections of Time combine intricate melodies with lyrics that resonated with fans navigating their own personal journeys. Grace's voice, now richer and deeper, carried a wisdom born of lived experience. She understood that the scars she bore, the betrayals, heartbreak, and hardships were not marks of weakness, but proof of survival and resilience. Every note she sang, every lyric she wrote became a testament to integrity and endurance. Her legacy was not just music, it was the courage to live openly, to transform suffering into art, and to create a space where vulnerability was celebrated, not hidden. Grace Mitchell had proven that true impact comes from connection, and that every scar, every story, is worth sharing. Now in her late 50s, Grace Mitchell stands as a testament to resilience, authenticity, and enduring artistry. Decades in, the spotlight have not dulled her voice or spirit. Instead, they have shaped a depth and emotional clarity few artists achieve. Her story, woven from childhood loss, personal trauma, industry battles, love, and betrayal, serves as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Grace no longer hides from her past. She embraces it, transforming every hardship into insight, every scar into a song. Today, Grace continues to write, record, and perform, but her approach has evolved. Studio sessions are intentional and reflective, emphasizing emotional truth over commercial pressure. Live performances have become communal experiences, where audiences are not passive spectators, but participants in a shared journey. Each lyric she sings carries the weight of lived experience, each note a bridge between her story and those who have found solace in her music. Fans often describe feeling profoundly seen and understood, as if Grace's voice articulates emotions they had long struggled to express themselves. Mentorship has become another cornerstone of her legacy. Grace invests in emerging artists, teaching them not only the craft of music, but also the courage to remain authentic. Amidst industry expectations, she emphasizes vulnerability as a strength, showing a new generation that artistry is most powerful when it reflects the truth of human experience. Beyond music, Grace's life embodies hope, survival, and reinvention. She has written books, supported charitable causes, and spoken publicly about mental health, trauma, and recovery. In every arena, her message is clear: honesty and perseverance are transformative. Grace Mitchell is more than a star. She is a survivor, a storyteller, and a beacon for anyone navigating life's storms with courage, honesty, and grace. Her voice remains unbroken, carrying a legacy that will resonate for generations to come.